Hello, my name is Cree. I'm a rapper, poet and storyteller, and over the course of 5 videos I'm going to show you how to write 3 poems in a way that I do it, and then pick one of those poems, edit it, then present it. So by the end of these 5 videos you're going to have a nice, well edited, well presented poem that's for yours to do what you want with. Now you're going to need a pen and some paper. I know some of you probably like to write on your mobile phones. That's fine. However, there is going to be a little bit of drawing involved, so you will need something to write and draw with. And also, personally, I'm a bit old school. I do like writing down on paper, particularly A4, as it's big enough for me to be able to see what I'm doing, and it allows me to create and work a lot better. All right. Now, before we get into any of that, you might well be asking yourself, why bother writing a poem or a story? And it's a perfectly reasonable question. When I was at school, I was probably the kid that would have asked the why question. In particular, with writing, I assumed that any type of writing was really for the children that went on to get really good marks, get the highest marks in class, because that wasn't really me. But what I realized is that I've got a lot going on inside here. And what I mean by that is I'm thinking about ideas. I have thoughts, opinions, and also feelings. And by writing those down, I learned that it actually feels quite good to do that. And it helped me to organize my thoughts and become a better communicator. And also, when I started sharing some of those ideas, thoughts and opinions, which manifested themselves into stories and little raps and poems, people responded. People from all different backgrounds and ages who I never thought would be bothered about what I think. And I ended up becoming friends with some of those people and finding things in common. But the best thing, the best part of the why I do it, why I write, is if I go away and I write a little story or a poem or whatever it is, and I spend a bit of time getting it down, editing it, and then producing it, even if I don't ever show anyone, I've just created something that now exists in this universe. I've made a little stamp, a little mark on time, and it's all mine. It all belongs to me. And to this day, I think that's pretty cool. Now, so it's your turn. We're going to get cracking with a narrative story, a narrative poem. So you're going to need your pen and your paper, and then we're going to get cracking. Hello. So if you've got your pen and your paper, then we're ready to begin. All right. So first thing we're going to do is a little warm-up exercise. We're going to do two little writing exercises. So you need your pen and your paper. And the first thing I want you to do, and you've got 1 minute to do this, is write a list of as many different words and phrases that you like to use on a daily basis, your favorite things to say. All right. So for example, on my little list here, a few little words and phrases that I like: wallop, I like saying that. Akaraway, and my grandpa's from Glasgow used to say that all the time. Bosh, nah mate, and cordia. These are all little words and phrases that I like to use. So you've got 1 minute to write as many as you can. Off you go. All right. Hopefully that was a little bit of fun. Some of these, all going well, you're going to be using a bit later on in your actual writing. So for the second warm-up exercise, again, this is going to take a minute. And the idea with these is no right or wrong. You just want to get your pen on the paper and write as much as you can. Even some of it doesn't particularly make sense, it's fine. All right, you're just getting these ideas out, and also we're coaxing out some nice personal details and interesting things about you that we can incorporate into the writing. All right, but it's a little bit of a fun thing. So for the second part of the warm-up, what you're now going to do, you're going to pick a subject that you know something about, something that you're interested in. Could be your hobby, could be your family, could be school, and you're going to write as much as you can. And again, try not to let that pen leave the paper for 1 minute. All right, so in mine, I chose football. I love football. And I wrote a few sentences just explaining what the game was. Football was a round ball kicked by 11 men on a pitch of grass with goalposts at the end, blah, 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 blah. All right, so I wrote as much detail as I could over the course of 1 minute. All right, so you ready? So you might want to pause the video. Off you go. Okay, so now we're ready to start doing a little bit of research into what's going to be our story. Is this a narrative poem that we're writing today? All right, so your first task, I want you to have a look around your room or the place that you're in right now. All right, have a look around, and I want you to pick one object, ideally an object that means something to you. So when I say an object, it could be a pen, it could be a pillow, it could be a toy, it could be a TV, it might be a book. So something that means something to you, i.e. you know a little bit about it, something that's belonging to you. So I did this, so I'm going to be going through these exercises with you. I've also done this myself, okay? So the little object I picked was an old friend of mine. Say hello to Stripey Bear. He's not actually a bear, he's a dog, but I named him Stripey Bear. So this is my object. And what I did for this exercise was to write down a couple of sentences describing Stripey Bear. So what I want you to do is pick your object and then write down a few sentences, ideally 3, describing what your object is. So for me, for instance, I had Stripey Bear is a dog with brown fur and a rip behind one ear, which you'll hear more a bit about. Stripey has a red and black jumper like Dennis the Menace, and it's a warning for any meddling adults. So I've added in a little bit of extra detail there. Stripey Bear weighs about the same and is as much fun as a big bag of Haribo, which he is. Stripey Bear is a relatable, reliable central midfielder who never gets injured. So I've just used a football metaphor to describe Stripey Bear. So I've described some of what he looks like and also what I think his characteristics may be. So you've got 1 minute, describe your object, or pick your object, describe your object, 3 sentences, try and make them sentences. Don't worry about the handwriting or spelling at this point, all right? Off you go. All right, so hopefully you have your object and a few sentences describing your object. So for the next part, so you might want to write it underneath on your page, I want you to tell me why you picked your object. So for me, Stripey Bear, I've written a few sentences basically explaining Stripey Bear has been with me my whole life, or most of my whole life. It was given to me by my nana when I was quite small for Christmas, and the rip on his ear was done by my little sister when we were very young and had some kind of argument, and I remember being very upset and my mum then getting a sewing needle and sewing it back on. So Stripey Bear has a lot of meaning for me. That's why I've picked Stripey Bear. So for you, you might want to state why it is you've picked your object. It could be your favorite book, it could be a device that you play games on, it might be your favorite pen, it might be a piece of clothing that was given to you by a relative, like my nan giving me Stripey Bear. If you just picked it because you don't really know any story or you don't really have any attachment to it, you might want to go back and pick a different object, or you can create a backstory. You can create a meaning as to why that object means something to you. All right, so a couple of sentences underneath the last one that you wrote. Off you go. All right, so now for this next exercise, I want you to tell me again in a few sentences, and whilst you're writing responses to these questions that I'm giving, try and incorporate some of the knowledge that you would have written down in the first exercise where you wrote about something that you knew about and you used words and phrases that you use on a daily basis. Try and see if you can incorporate some of those into your responses, because ideally when we go on to write the piece, you want it to sound like you every day talking. Okay, so I've used lots of football analogies to explain my decisions. So this next question is, and again you're going to write a couple of sentences, Where does this object come from? Is there a backstory? So I mentioned earlier on with Stripey that he was given to me by my nana for Christmas when I was quite small. I don't know where Stripey Bear was manufactured or what country he came from. All I know is that my nan gave it to me for Christmas, and I think for me, I'm quite happy about that backstory. For you, you might be interested in where your object was produced. It might be some china that's from China, you never know, or a book from a particular country or written in a certain language. So you might really be interested in the origin. If you really don't know, but you're dead set on using the object that you've got, see if you can create a backstory, okay, as to where this object comes from. All right, so again, a couple of sentences, off you go. All right, so now you've got an object and you've described the object and you've explained where this object comes from and what it means to you. So hopefully an idea for a story could be starting to emerge. You might want to tell the origins of this object or something to do with this object and yourself interacting. Which leads me on to my next question, which is quite an important one as this will engage the emotions. So your next question, again, a couple of sentences. How would you feel or what would you do if you lost this object? What would you feel or what would you do if you lost this object? So my response was, I put, if I lost Stripey Bear, I'd be really upset and probably angry, as if I'd been sent off in a really important football match. So again, I've used a football metaphor there, or a football simile rather, because football is what my knowledge base is. All right, so a couple of sentences, off you go. All right, so something should now be starting to emerge with this object, perhaps a story, perhaps it's a backstory. So always, in all good stories, you're probably going to have at least a couple of characters. So the next question is, who are the people associated with this object? It may well be someone that gave you the object. If it's an accessory like a football, for instance, it might be people that you play football with, or the person that gave you the football, or your coach, your trainer, or your teacher. It might be your friends that you sit in class with when you use your favourite pen. So as I mentioned, this is going back to Stripey Bear. It was given to me by my nana. I've mentioned my mum sewing back on the ear, so you can still see like the thread there, and my little sister. So they're all the people that jump out to me when I think about Stripey Bear, and also my wife as well, but you'll hear a bit more about that later on. All right, so a few sentences. Who are the characters and can you describe those characters? So just quickly, there's a few sentences. So I put, so my mum, me, Nana, and my younger sister, and I've written a few words to describe each one. So for my mum, I put kind, gentle, calm, and caring. For my sister, I put annoying, little, vicious. She's not vicious anymore. It's just back then she whipped the ear, so she was quite vicious when we were younger, but she was small. She's fine now. And then I put my nana, and I put mum's mum, elderly, generous, and wise. There's a few words of description, so you're gonna list the characters and then a few words to describe them. All right, off you go. Hello. So the next part, now you've got the characters, now you've got the object, and you've got a little bit of background about the object. What are the locations involved with this object? So you may have a story starting to emerge. So maybe it's an object that goes with you to different places, like a piece of stationery that you take to school perhaps, or football that you go take to the park or you go to the playground. Or it could be something that you use in your bedroom, your room at home, like a book or a game or something. So Stripey Bear, for me, even though he lives in my new house, he always reminds me of the house that I grew up in, specifically the living room, as it was in the living room where I first opened the Christmas present that my nana gave me with Stripey Bear inside. It's also in the living room where my sister ripped his ear. And in my bedroom, of course, where I would wrestle with Stripey Bear and make him go and goal downstairs when I was pretending to play football. So they're the locations for me. My living room in the house that I grew up in, and the bedroom in the house that I grew up in. So try and write a little bit of description for those locations, but ideally we want to get those locations written down and try and picture them in your head, because we're going to refer to them later on. Off you go. So now, all going well, some sort of story should be starting to emerge. Again, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps you might want to tell the origins of this object. You might want to tell how you came to have this object, or you might be thinking about a story involving you in this object where it goes missing, or you go on an adventure or something like that. So the next part, we're going to be starting to script out, we're going to draw out a structure for this story. So for me, I've decided I want to tell the life story of Stripey Bear since he came into my life when I was a child, as I'm a little bit older now, and we've gone through a little bit. So the life and times of Stripey Bear is a story that I want to tell. So see if you can write a couple of sentences just summing up what this story is that you want to go and write. All right, so a couple of sentences, off you go. Okay, for this next part, as we're now moving into starting to write the story and tell the story, you're definitely going to need your pen and paper. So if you've been using your phone at this point to write notes down, you're going to want a piece of pen and paper, okay? Because we're going to draw a timeline so we can plot out this story that you want to tell. Now, I'll briefly show you what I've done here. It's very poor illustrations and drawing, but this is only for me, so I can know how to work from the beginning to the middle to the end and what points I need to talk about when I'm writing my story. So I've written this line here with a few, I think, indices. I don't know what you call them, I can't remember. They're just dashes to me, and I've got 6 on there, but try and see if you can get 5. And what I found with this particular story about Stripey Bear, I knew I wanted to tell this story about when Stripey came into my life and what's happened since then up until now. So I knew I wanted to begin with me opening the Christmas present with Stripey inside and end with Stripey being in the room that I'm in now as a fully grown adult and the journey in between. So I knew what the start and ending was. So for my first bit, I've just written living room, and I've drawn a little Christmas tree to remind me that it's Christmas. And then there's my nana sat in her chair, and then me on the floor opening the present and pulling out Stripey. So then I went straight to the end, because I knew, if you can see that, I knew what I wanted the ending to be. It's not definite, it's not always the case, but in this story, in this process, I was quite clear that's where I wanted to finish. Like I say, it's never a cold, fast and shut case. I may well change it. I didn't. Sometimes I do. But I knew roughly that the ending I wanted to be in my new house with my wife in a bedroom with Stripey Bear and her giving it to me. So I wrote my new house and a picture of my new bedroom. So then once I realised what the start and end point was, I then knew I wanted to tell that story going through bit by bit as I get older and Stripey gets older. So for the second part, I thought I'll tell the story about when my sister ripped Stripey Bear's ear in the living room. So there's a picture of me upset crying holding Stripey Bear. The second one, I put my bedroom, as I used to pretend to be a wrestler, like WWF, that's what it was called back then. I think it's called WWE now. And me and Stripey used to wrestle together. I was the Ultimate Warrior, he was Hulk Hogan. So I've drawn a picture of my bedroom. And then the next part, I've drawn a cardboard box, because as I got older, I wasn't going to play with Stripey Bear anymore, so he went away in a cardboard box in the corner of my bedroom. And the next one, I've drawn a picture of a house with a roof on it, because we had a loft in the home that I lived in. Stripey Bear was put in a box that went up into the loft. And the next bit, When I left home, I moved around all over the place. He stayed in that loft, and eventually we came back and got him. So that is my little timeline, very, very simple. So take a couple of minutes to do this, all right? It don't need to be perfect, just something to help you, remind you what these important points in your story are. So you can draw pictures, you don't have to write words or either or, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so off you go. Right, so now you've got your timeline. I want you to have a go just looking at your timeline. Can you tell this story? Don't worry about writing it, getting your words and sentences correct. If there's someone in your room, can you show them and just explain very, very roughly what this story is, so you're getting used to speaking it and getting it into order. So have a go, take a minute or two, have a couple of goes 2 or 3 times, and if there is any expressions or words or phrases that you use whilst you're having a go at talking out this story, write them down, because they'll come in handy a bit later on. So for me, I'm gonna say this is a story about my childhood toy dog that I got called Stripey Bear, who's probably a dog, but I called him Stripey Bear. And you know, I talked you through this just earlier on, but just very, very quickly, I was given him for Christmas by my nana in the living room at home. I'm wrapping a Christmas present. My sister, as I got older, ripped his ear in an argument, and there's me in the bedroom, where as I got older I got really into wrestling. Stripey would be my wrestling partner. That's him going into a box, that's him going, you get the picture. All right, so give that a go, take a minute or two, and then we're going to come back and start writing the story. Right, so now we're going to get into the actual writing of the story. So there's 2 important things I want to mention before we actually go into starting to write out your story. And the first thing is on style. So what I mean by style is, how is the poem going to be formed on a page? So stylistically, there's lots of different types of poetic styles. Sometimes you can have rhyming poems, sometimes you have ones with very specific meters or an amount of syllables. Now with me, I prefer to write in what we call free write, so it doesn't have a particular structure. I'm a rapper, I've been rapping for a long time, so I like to use rhyme, but in free rhyme I kind of go in and out of rhyme, so sometimes I'm rhyming, sometimes I'm not. I find for me that's my most comfortable and the best way for me to tell this story. But there's no hard and fast rules. If you want to rhyme it, you can rhyme it. If you don't want to rhyme, that's fine. All right, but you want to be doing it in a way that sounds as natural and your real talking voice. You want to do it as if you're telling the story to your best friend or your mum or whoever. So try and think about all those words and phrases that you normally use, all of those things that you're interested in, be it football or be it music or art, and try and incorporate some of those words and phrases into what you're saying. So that's style. All right, but don't worry too much about that. The second thing is perspective. Now we're telling a story, so perspective is really, really important here. And what I mean by perspective is first, second or third. So if it's first person, it's me that's telling the story. I think personally, that's my preferred way of telling a story, as it's my story that I'm telling. People will engage, I think, a lot more if they hear it as if it's me that's telling the story. So that's I, so the singular. But you don't have to do it that way. Personally, I prefer it that way. Or you can say you, second person, or you can do it from third person as if you're talking about someone else. And of course, when is this story taking place? Are you talking past tense or are you talking present tense? Personally, again, I prefer a mixture of past tense and present tense. So what I mean by that is, essentially it's written in present tense, but from me as an adult now, going into a flashback, if you like. So there's a little bit of a blend between the two, but generally I will look to write it in present tense, as I think it's great to allow people to really dive into what your story is and picture what's going on. All right, so now we're getting ready to write our story. Now, often people will struggle with the first line. right? First lines can be really, really difficult. Now, a little tip, I find it really, really helps to set the scene. So in your first line or first couple of lines is to give a little bit of information. So you could be time of day, day of the week, the season in the year, winter, and maybe your age. I find that really helps to set the scene and get into the story. So for my little story about Stripey Bear, I've written first sentence, I'm small, I'm not sure what age, but it's Christmas Day. So I've told you that I'm little, but I don't know what my age is, but I'm hoping you can guess that I'm a child and that it's Christmas Day. And then boom, I'm straight into that first part of the story where I'm unwrapping the present. So you're now going to have a go at writing your story. So think about your style, your perspective, make that decision before you start writing it, but don't worry too much. If you're writing it and you think it isn't right, you can always start again. Take your time, so maybe about 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and have a look at the end. All right, best of luck. Okay, so if you've got to the end and you've got the beginnings or a first draft of your narrative poem, well done. Maybe it's your first time, congratulations. Hopefully that's the first of many. Maybe this is your 100th time, well done and congratulations anyway, because it's always good. So the last thing I want you to do is very, very quickly is have a read of what you've written. Try and read it out loud. Have a pen ready in case there's anything you want to change. This is going to be a very, very basic edit, but all going well. If you go on to choose this, we're going to look at editing in another video. But read it out loud a couple of times, make any changes, and then that there is your lot. So, well done. That's it from me for now. I'm going to read you this poem that I've written about Stripey Bear. Well done. Next video is going to be a list poem, so it's going to be slightly different. But until then, here's my narrative poem that I've written just before I filmed this, which is called The Life and Times of Stripey Bear. I'm small. I'm reading it off here, by the way. I'm not sure what age, but it's Christmas Day, and I'm unwrapping a present from Nana, who died when I was about 8. Anyway, she sat in the armchair, kind, wise, and a bit slow with her movements. But she's old though. I think she's supposed to be slow. I'm on the floor, desperately trying to rip the paper off this present she's given me. It feels soft. I don't know what it is. And I unwrap the present. I pull out a surprise from underneath, like a dolphin bursting out the sea. I see a soft, cuddly toy with brown fur, floppy ears, and a red and white stripy jumper. This is Stripey Bear, my new best mate. I'll find out later in life that Stripey Bear isn't meant to be a bear, probably a dog. But he's Stripey Bear to me, and always will be. And this is his story. Stripey has been my companion for a long time now. He goes in goal when I recreate my favourite football matches in the living room, with the goalpost between 2 armchairs and the French windows being the net, and my little sister's toy duck being the ball. Mum tells me off when I get in trouble when Stripey and me get sent upstairs. Sometimes we wrestle as I recreate my favourite WWF matches, Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan, me putting Stripey into the gorilla press and slamming him back down onto the makeshift wrestling ring using me and my brother's duvets. Mum will shout up the stairs and tell me off, tell me to stop. Sometimes my little sister joins in, even though she's really annoying. This one time we were arguing. Stripey was in my hands. She tried to take him off me. She grabbed, I pulled, whip. I fell back against the wall. Stripey Bear in my hands, but one of his ears half hanging off. Cried my eyes off. Poor dear, Mum would say. Then she saved the day by using her super sewing skills to sew on back his ear. But it was never the same. I felt like it was to blame, even though it was probably my sister's fault. I could always see the thread round the back of his ears. At some point, Stripey must have moved to a corner in my room and stayed there for a very long time, as my football posters and wrestling figures were replaced by CDs, books and music equipment. Sometimes I'd move things around in the room, see Stripey say hello to an old friend and then go back to what I was doing again. Stripey Bear got put in a box and this box got put in the loft. It's like I almost forgot as I moved on, and eventually I moved out. I moved around many addresses over many years until I got the call one day to say that my parents were moving out of the family home. I needed to go back and get the last of my things from out of the loft, the cardboard box. My girlfriend helped me out, went through my things, and she found Stripey Bear, asked me about who he was. And without telling me, she took him and brought him back to our new house, where we now live. Not long after that, my girlfriend became my wife, and Stripey now lives next to both of us on the chair by the bed. And best of all, he's now got a new friend called Aragon, my wife's teddy. And every day when I wake, I get to see my old friend, my best mate, Stripey Bear. There you go. So that's the first draft. If you've got all this far, well done. Thank you for watching. Make sure you watch the next video and we're going to look at editing. Alright?